続きまして、鹿児島県出身、オシアナこと今井真理さんによります、日本の仏です。オシアナ、よろしくお願いいたします。
皆さん、こんにちは。
こんにちは。
鹿児島県日置出身のオシアナこと今井真理です。今回は私がラストスピーカー、ヘイリーの前のスピーカーということで、今とても緊張しているのですが、ぜひ温かく見守ってください。今回は仏教について話したいと思います。仏教って聞いても普段あまり考えない方が多いと思います。ですが、この仏教を通して私たちはたくさん学ぶことがあります。今日はそれをお伝えしたいので、ぜひ最後までお聞きください。Do you believe in reincarnation? The Buddhist teaching, known in Japan as Rinne Tensei. It is a belief that when a living being dies, its soul is reborn into another form of life. It affirms our inability to accept death as a final end. It allows us to discover hope even in the depths of grief. Last September, I lost my grandfather to pancreatic cancer. It was such a sudden death that I could hardly believe it. Just this summer, he had come here to listen to my speech. At the time, the only comfort left for our grieving family was to pray for reincarnation, to believe that someday, somehow, we would meet him again. Well, such Buddhism has faced destruction twice since it was introduced to Japan. So today, I'd like to tell you the story of Buddhism. Yet, it faced known as Haibutsu Kishaku. In 538, three kingdoms, Baekje, Goguryeo, and Silla were fighting on the Korean peninsula. Baekje sought military assistance from Japan and presented Japan with Buddhist statues and sutras. This marked the official introduction of Buddhism to Japan. Unfortunately, the epidemic broke out around that time. So, can you guess what happened? Buddhism was blamed for the disease. The emperor accepted these accusations, and newly built temples and sutras were destroyed. Mononobe no Moriya, the leading opponent of Buddhism, attacked the temple constructed by Sogano Umako, burned Buddhist images, and even had nuns whipped. This extreme anti-Buddhist movement finally ended when the Soga clan defeated the Mononobe clan in battle. From 593, Empress Suiko, Sogano Umako, and Prince Shotoku led the government. They constructed temples such as Asuka-dera, Shitennoji, and Horyuji, as well as the great Buddha of Asuka, many of which still remain today. Relics of the Buddha were enshrined in the pagoda of Asuka-dera. Just as ancient rulers had been buried in coffin tombs, temples began to enshrine the spirits of ancestors. Japan has long possessed a unique ability to harmonize foreign culture with its own traditions. Over roughly 50 years, the time of Shinbutsu began. Now, what motivated the Soga clan to promote Buddhism? There were three main purposes. First, to unify immigrants from Korea and China. These newcomers possessed advanced knowledge in writing, mathematics, architecture, metalwork, and calendrical science. By supporting Buddhism, the Soga clan gained their allegiance. Second, to defeat the powerful Mononoke clan who upheld traditional Shinto beliefs. Buddhism, with its universal teachings, offered a new source of authority. Third, to join the international community. At the time in East Asia, Buddhism functioned as a kind of international standard of culture and education. For Japan to engage in diplomacy, it needed the cultural foundation. With the adoption of Buddhism, Japan changed significantly. Shinto emphasized the ancestral lineage. One could attain high status simply by birth. Buddhism, however, valued personal merit over bloodline. This led to the creation of the 12-rank system, a merit-based system that allowed talented individuals of lower birth to participate in politics. This respect for individual virtue also appeared in moral philosophy. 和をもって尊しとなす。Harmony is to be valued. You may recognize this as Article 1 of 17th Article Constitution. It discouraged conflicts rooted in lineage and urged people to cherish harmony instead. Perhaps this is a lesson modern Japan still needs. Do you remember the term Shinbutsu? For nearly 1,000 years, Shinto and Buddhism coexisted. One such concept is known as Honji Suijaku. It holds that Shinto deities were manifestations of Buddhism, who had appeared to save the Japanese people. This reflects. That's why shrines sometimes stand within temple grounds and temples within shrine precincts. This reflects the remarkable flexibility of the Japanese spirit. But this harmony would not last forever. In 1853, black ships appeared off the coast of Kanagawa. Commodore Perry's arrival from the United States. This was not merely a diplomatic visit. It signaled the growing influence of Christianity. Some Shinto scholars fear that Western nations would use Christianity to manipulate the Japanese people and turn Japan into a colony. But they also question whether Buddhism, long protected and weakened by the shogunate, could resist this threat. Their solution was to strengthen national unity by centering faith solely on Shinto. After Tokugawa Yoshinobu returned political to the emperor in 1868, the new Meiji government issued the Shinbutsu Bunri Edict formally separating Shinto and Buddhism. Faces were smashed, arms torn off, hairs severed, statues burned, thrown into rivers, melted down. These damaged Buddhist images did not erode through time. They were deliberately destroyed by human hands. In Kagoshima, the violence was especially severe. All 1,660 temples of the former Satsuma domain were melted down. Every single one. Among the 481 temples that exist today, not single statue of sufficient age remains to qualify as a national treasure or important cultural property. Wooden statues became firewood. Stone statues were used in embankments, and temple bells and bronze statues were melted into cannons and coins. Yet the government never explicitly ordered, destroy them. The aim had been to establish Shinto as a national property, not to annihilate Buddhism. The destruction was largely carried out voluntarily by overzealous officials and Shinto priests. That's why the term Haibutsu Kishaku, abolish Buddhism and destroy Shakyamuni, is distinct from Shinbutsu Bunri. It is said that resentment over status and unequal treatment fuel this movement. In the end, humans have always been prone to blaming others. By the way, to any Shinto believers listening, I may sound like a devoted Buddhist today, but please do not misunderstand me. I am not to fear. I am not to fight with you. I just want to share the beauty of Shinbutsu Shugo. Buddhism teaches impermanence, that all things are constantly changing. Through this teaching, we learn to face death instead of merely feeling it. We found hope in the belief that we may meet our loved ones again, and thus we found strength to move forward. Looking at the world today through the lens of Haibutsu Kishaku, we see people braving, destroying, and even assassinating in order to eliminate opposing views. But why do we reject what is different? Politicians say, a new Japan. But why must something created new require erasing the old? Why deny the long history of this country? Just as our ancestors once honored both gods and Buddhas together, perhaps what we need now is not exclusion, but listening. Not denial, but mutual respect. If we can do that, I believe the Japanese people and Japan itself can once again stand united. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。それではペリー先生、could you please give us some comments?
Thank you, Oceana. That was a really informative speech. First off, I'm very sorry about your grandfather. My grandmother passed away about a year and a half ago, so yeah, I definitely know how you feel with that. So I'm an atheist myself, so it means I don't believe in any religion. But one of the things I've always admired about Japan is that kind of flexibility that Japanese people have with religion. There's a saying that Japanese people are born Shinto, they marry Christian, and they die Buddhist, or something along those. I'm thinking maybe I'm mixed up, but it's something along those lines, and it kind of shows because they take the babies to the temples when they're born. When they get married, there's often like the Christian version of the wedding ceremony, and then death having to do with reincarnation and all of that. So it shows that kind of flexibility of belief. And even though I don't have any religious beliefs, I've always admired like religious architecture, like the Buddhist temples, the Shinto shrines. The Christian cathedrals and all of that, all the artwork and stuff that's come out of religious beliefs is always very impressive, and it's always very, very sad when you hear stories about this stuff being destroyed by other people. You mentioned that you made a not so subtle reference to a current political party at the end of your speech there, and I agree with you. And I think what you were saying there about how Buddhism was blamed for the pandemic way back when, and they were destroying temples, and small-minded bigots, they'll always exploit fear to advance hate, and that political party you mentioned is doing that now too. And I think the idea of separating Buddhism and Shinto and having one state religion over another, it shows the danger of what happens when you try to mix religion and government, when you try to force beliefs on people, when really these things should be completely separate. Freedom of religion is what promotes coexistence and cooperation, I think, and mutual respect, and that's much more important than saying you believe what I believe or I'm going to kill you, right? So I think it's very important that someone like you understands this at such a young age, so I'm glad you're advancing that message. Thank you.
Thank you.
学院長コメントをお願いいたします。
ペリー先生が君のような意見を持つ若者がいるというのは素晴らしいなって言いましたね。やっぱりこういうふうに両方からいつも見れるっていうのはいいことなんですね。一方だけ日本だけ素晴らしいっていうんじゃなくて、日本だってこういう失敗したんだよと。これ確かにね、あの時代本当に短い時代の廃仏希釈ですけど、鹿児島だけはひどかったんですよね。もう玉龍高校の後ろの玉龍山福祥寺なんかも日本一の素晴らしいお寺だったのに全部潰されてね、大反省ですけれども、でもね、その壊した人たちだけじゃなくて非常に有識者も西洋から入ってくるいろんなものが全部素晴らしく見えて、もともとあったものは全部なくそうっていうこういう話が本当にあったんですね。例えばニトベイナゾなんか素晴らしい武士道を書いて世界にいろいろ広めた人なんですけども、東大の教養学部の校長になってからね、あの頃は高校ですけどね、校長になってから今までの日本の考えというのはもう勉強しなくていいと、新しいものを入れろというリベラル的な、すごいリベラル的な発想になって、で森有則も留学に行って帰ってきた時にはもう全部日本の国語は英語でやりましょうとかね、もうダメですよね。だからでもすぐ彼らは反省するんです、その後ね。でもこういう汚点がいっぱいあって、だから僕は潰されたあれはちょっと反省するためにね、潰れた仏像のいくつか残しててもいいけど、鹿児島までいっぱいありますからね、廃仏希釈の跡が。少しぐらいは元の世界に戻してほしいなと思うので、早く県知事に君の方から早くしてよって言ってきてくださいね。はい、頑張ってください。僕が言うと反発を食らうので、ね、君が言うと多分認めてくれるかもしれない。お願いします。はい。
ありがとうございます。